Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another session on Learn Live on building Bicep templates for the Azure platform. We're very happy to have you all here. My name is Gitte. I work as an engineer in the FastTrack for Azure team at Microsoft, where I help our customers day-to-day deploy their workloads on the Azure platform, focusing mostly on app dev workloads, and also a lot of DevOps and a lot of infrastructure as code. So with me today, I'm joined again by Alex. Hi, Alex. Happy to have you here again.
Hi, Gitte. Thanks for having me again. I'm excited to do this with you.
Yeah. So, and what's your role within Microsoft? Because you also work at Microsoft, right?
Yep. I work at Microsoft, so I'm a product manager on what we call the ARM deployments team. So that's the team responsible for tools like Bicep and ARM templates and blueprints and Terraform and kind of everything that rhymes with that.
Okay, awesome. And I love doing these sessions with you because that means we get the information firsthand. So yeah. I just love that stuff. Today we'll actually be talking about both Bicep modules, but also on how you can share Bicep modules by using private registries. So that's going to be our topic of the day. For people who want to follow along with this module, there is an aka.ms link and a QR code that you can use to actually go to that module, go through it by yourself as well, and just follow along while we go through the different parts of the module. We will be having a bit of difficult time today because we'll be talking both about Bicep modules and we are working inside of a Microsoft Learn module as well. So you'll hear a lot of module during this Learn module. So anyway, today as well. So in case today you have any questions, we also have our great moderator with us today as well, which is my colleague Josh. So hi, Josh. Thanks for taking all the questions. If you're following this session live, any question that you may have on Bicep modules, on the private registries, just put it in the chat window. Joshua will be very, very happy to answer them for you. And it might even be that he just forwards some of those questions to Alex and myself, and then we can actually answer them for you live in the session as well.
And Josh actually just moved to my neighborhood, so he'll actually be delivering all the questions by hand. He'll be knocking on my door with them.
Yeah, from your backyard then.
Yeah,
actually.
exactly.
exactly. So yeah, this just again the Learn Live link that you can use and the QR code. So today it's gonna be about module registries. Now, in case you don't know what Bicep modules are or what Bicep as a language, as a templating language is, this is actually, well, I actually lost count how many session this is in the series. But there's like a whole ton of previous sessions that you can look at to learn Bicep itself as a templating language, but also to see or to learn about what modules themselves, what they are as well. So I definitely advise you, if you don't know what Bicep modules are, like in short, it's a way of reusing Bicep codes. That's basically what you can do with a module, right? You can put certain Bicep code in a module, and then you can reuse it across multiple templates. So in case you don't know that stuff, the link is also in the banner. You can definitely go to the previous Learn Live session as well and learn up on the modules. But today it's modules and private registries, which means that what you'll actually be learning today is, first of all, what registries, what these registries are, and what they enable you to do, but also how you can create a private registry for your own organization, and how you can then, once you have such a registry, how you can then use that registry to publish your modules to, and how you can then consume those modules across your organization. That's like this session is going to be about reuse, right? And about doing something once and then leveraging that effort. So, and I'm actually getting a pointer that this is actually episode 14 out of 15. So we're 14 episodes far in this series. There's one more episode coming up, but small teaser. Some people already pinged me, and it might be like September, October timeframe. We'll actually be doing a next series on the learn modules for Bicep, and then specifically on the automating side of things. So that's also going to be a great series. But currently, we're at episode 14 out of 50. Cool. Let's get started. Let's get started on private registries. So what you need to know for today's episode is actually, well, first of all, what Bicep modules are, right? So Bicep in itself is a templating language that you use to describe your Azure environment or your Azure deployment, and that you can then reuse to, let's say, deploy the same resources to your Azure environment. And modules actually give you a way of creating reusable components and reusable resources for reuse in other Bicep templates. Now, typically, and Alex, like typically people, when they first start using modules, that's just all local, right? It's just maybe in a folder or in the local folder. That's like the first way in which people start using modules. I think that's correct to say, right?
Yep, exactly. And so they reach a logical endpoint of that kind of journey of like, okay, well, what if I want to give this to somebody else? I'm not going to, attach the file in an email and send it to someone and hope that it stays in sync forever. We need a more mature way of kind of handling this.
Yeah, and that's then exactly where the private registries come in. So private as in that, well, if you have modules that you want to reuse, it's not necessarily that you're going to put secrets in your modules, like that's like a no-go, but still there's like information in there on how you build your environment. So you probably don't want to share that across the entire world, but you want to like have something private for your company, right?
Yep, exactly. I mean, I think usually, like you said, infrastructure code is not like some trade secret for the most part, but it may not be ready for like the due diligence of the entire public, and you just want to keep it, within your organization.
Exactly. And that's where the private registries come in. Do you actually see a lot of customers use modules in their deployments? Like, is there a lot of use that you see across customers of this feature?
Yeah, I mean, so modules in general, definitely like super popular. It's just made it really easy to simplify and kind of componentize your projects. And then we have seen a lot of good usage of the private registry, just because, and we'll go through why it's so easy, but it's so easy to kind of get started and start sharing content and have it be versioned and all the sorts of things that you want to do.
Yeah. So, and that's also going to be something we'll be talking about. It's like the versioning of the modules and the sharing and how you can properly do that, right? So that's all going to be part of what we talk about today. What you'll also see, and you see that across all of the Learn Live sessions, is that we always start from a example scenario. So this session is no different. In this case, the example scenario is we have a toy company, and the toy company, they've already created a template for deploying a website and a CDN for one use case, which was a pet toy that they had. But now they have another toy and another team that also wants to deploy the same components, like the same website and CDN. And they actually want to reuse that effort that was done by the first team. The first team modularized. So they created a module for the website and the CDN, but they now want to reuse those modules. And it's actually exactly the same use case that you just also mentioned, Alex, where like the people responsible of those modules, they're thinking like distributing those modules through an email or like sharing them through Teams or what have you. That's not a really sustainable way of doing that. And so they want to have a way of managing the access control, managing the different versions of those modules in case something changes, so they can like version those things. And that's exactly the challenge that they want to that they want to solve. So and that's what this session is also gonna be about. So and yeah, we also already kind of mentioned it, but like versioning will be or can be a very important thing when distributing modules, right?
Yeah, versioning is really critical to kind of have a plan before you start, and we'll talk about the different versioning schemes and things like that. But you want to be thinking through which type of versioning scheme do we want to use? When do we publish a new version versus keep an existing one? What's a minor version? What's a major version? All that kind of fun stuff. And if you have experience with versioning in the past, it all applies to Bicep modules. There's really nothing special that we're doing here.
Exactly, exactly. Cool. So during the session, what we'll be doing is you'll learn about the private registries for sharing your modules. And by the end, you'll be able to create your registry. You'll be able to publish modules to it, and you'll be able to consume modules from it. Yeah. But like first thing we then need to talk about is what are module registries and why you want to use them. Yeah. And like a lot of these points we already kind of mentioned or touched upon. But it's like the ease of reuse that you want to go for, like but also like the discoverability. Like if you use a module registry and you can centralize that somewhere, when people want to deploy new stuff, they can actually just go to the registry, look at what is already there, and based on what they find, they can say, hey, this is actually something I can now reuse, and I can just sort of take it off the shelf and use it in my own deployment. So you're actually like reusing other people's efforts without reinventing the wheel and redoing the same effort. That's basically what you'll be trying to achieve with, first of all, building the Bicep modules, but also by sharing them. Now, an important thing to know here as well is that we'll actually be talking about Bicep registries, but there's also such a thing as template specs. Actually, I told you we're at episode 14 out of 15 today. Actually, episode 15, the one coming next week, that one is actually going to be about template specs. So we'll go deeper into template specs there. But like, Alex, if you could like say the biggest differences between template specs and Bicep registries, where would you say the biggest difference lies?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is that the template specs are kind of intended to be like a complete unit of deployment. So you're able to take your template spec, which could be Bicep code at the beginning, but you're publishing it as a template spec, which means you're publishing it as a resource to Azure. And that template spec, a user can go just in the portal and search for the template spec and deploy it. And we have like a nice UI experience, and it's a little more on Rails. And you can give access really easily to individual template specs. So you might say you want to give access to this VM deployment template spec, what have you. And it all just kind of works as expected. Whereas the Bicep registry is more a library of content that you're making available within Bicep projects. So it's more in the common case, you'll give access to the whole registry, or at least a whole like repository of content. And that makes all that content available in those projects. So you can grab little components that you can compose together in your own kind of main Bicep executions.
So basically, if you compare it, then like the Bicep registry and like the modules in there, they are like the Lego blocks.
Yeah.
And like the template spec is more like the full house that you get.
Exactly.
Okay. And the thing is like Bicep registries, what you'll see there as well, this is basically Bicep only. Like only Bicep knows modules. And a lot of people will be coming from, let's say, azure-resource-manager templates in JSON format. The Bicep registries, they don't apply to that. Yeah, so because JSON format doesn't know modules, it's just not in there. But they do know template specs, right? And I see you nodding, Alex. So
yep, exactly. So if you are only using ARM templates, then you can use template specs today. If you are in Bicep, you actually can choose. You can use both. So you can use Bicep registry as a source for content. And if you want, we actually have a syntax to reference template specs in your Bicep project. So if you want to take that template spec that you made available in ARM for whatever reason, and you want that to be a Lego block. So let's say you're building a neighborhood in Bicep, right? And you have a complete house in a template spec. You may want to deploy that house 7 different times with different parameters. So you can do that easily in Bicep as well.
Okay, so they're actually then intermixable, let's say, not interchangeable, but intermixable. You can, let's say, in Bicep do a subscription scoped deployment, and then the template spec, for instance, is like resource group scoped. That might be the use case.
Yeah, you can do all sorts of combinations. I think, admittedly, there is some overlap in what you can do in each. So you may not need to do both or want to do both. But there are certain cases where one is a better choice than the other.
Okay. And I also see like in the Bicep registry column that we have on the slide. So modules in registries, those can be seen as container artifacts. And that actually brings me directly to the next slide, meaning that when you create a Bicep private registry, this is actually just built on top of, or this is actually just a container registry. So an Azure container registry that people may know from using Azure Kubernetes service, or the web apps on containers, when they need a container registry, it's the same registry that they'll be using for storing their Bicep templates, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when this is, I guess, a little bit of history since we have the time for it. When we were looking at technologies to support what we wanted to deliver with the Bicep registry, we looked at a lot of different options. And Azure Container Registries, they're basically built on this open specification called OCI. And OCI is, I think, Open Container Initiative. And within OCI, there's a separate spec for something called OCI artifacts. And kind of the idea there was like, look, container registries are this great kind of distribution technology. And we're only using it for container images right now. Can we extend it to do arbitrary content? And actually, the first really popular use case was Helm charts. So Helm charts are just text files. They're like Kubernetes manifests. They're not big like binaries or anything like container images. And it just happened to be that container registries were good distribution technologies for distributing Helm charts. And so really we're doing basically the exact same thing. And what it means is, one, we have to do a lot less work. We don't have to build a lot of infrastructure. So we like that. But two, we're kind of building on an ecosystem that's really mature and really established, relatively speaking, of course. So container registries have to deal with all sorts of complexities of like networking, private link, access control, air gapped. I mean, you name it, there's all sorts of complexities that container images have to deal with. And so building on top of container registries just means we get a lot of like safety and maturity built in off the bat.
Yeah. And that's exactly what this one is also about. It's like reuse of that container registry technology as well. So in case you want to do like AAD integration and make control who has access to the registry and who doesn't. Like there's no like RBAC within the registry, like on a image or per module kind of basis, but to the whole the registry as a whole, that is definitely something you can do. You can also look at token-based access control, which is just built into Azure Container Registry. And you mentioned the private network access. So in case people want to further lock down the container registry on top of what you can do with authentication authorization, they can actually just integrate this in their private network. Yeah? In case you do so, though, and you do the private network access, make sure that when you're then publishing Bicep modules to your registry, in that case, you do need to be within that same network. Like you need to be on the VPN. You need, if you're in the on-prem VPN, let's say, you need to have like the site-to-site VPN or ExpressRoute in place, or maybe like a jump box in Azure, what have you. But yeah, your networking team will know what to do when you make that thing private. And you can also do things like IP-based access control, which is like an access control list where you say, hey, these are the IPs, or this is the IP range that has access to the registry. So you can actually properly lock things down and properly protect your resources or your artifacts, so to speak. So, and I think with that's actually a great jump to actually a first exercise on how people can actually create a registry. So Alex, can you show us how a registry gets created?
I can, and it's so easy. So I'll be happy to show that. So we'll switch over to VS Code. There's a myriad of ways to create a container registry because it's an Azure resource, and there are plenty of ways to create Azure resources. So I think in the Learn module, they show a way of doing it in PowerShell, a way of doing it in the CLI. You could do it with the portal if you wanted to. We'll actually do it in Bicep because why not? That sounds more fun to me. I have this very simple Bicep code snippet here. If I wanted to use AZ-CLI to do it, I just use the AZ-ACR create command. And there's nothing all that complicated about the container registry itself. It actually, you can just use a vanilla ACR with all the defaults, and that actually works for the registry. There's no special settings or anything like that that you need. So this is a very basic CLI command for creating it. And then, of course, I can do it with Bicep as well. So the type is container registry / registries. I'm using the latest API version, which happens to be a preview version, but you could use an older GA'd version. I'm giving it a name. There are some naming requirements here. You're not allowed to have dashes, I think. It will validate all those sorts of things. So I just have it as one string here, just using the resource group's location, and then I'm using the basic SKU. And this may even be a default property. I didn't try it without it, but again, nothing special here. And so I'll deploy this the way I deploy any other Bicep file. So I'll just do AZ deployment group create. I have a resource group, so I'm going to do -G, which is the shorthand for resource group, and it's learn live registries, I'm pretty sure, and then point it to the file that I want to deploy, which is acr.bicep. And so we'll let this go and start deploying. I happen to have this ACR already created, so I'm actually just doing what should be a no-op overwrite of the existing ACR. And this should just take 15 or 30 seconds. And right now it's a blank ACR. So while this is running, I can actually show in the Docker extension. So we didn't build this, we didn't influence it or anything like that. But within the Docker extension, you can explore your container registry. So this is kind of a convenient way of working with things within VS Code. So we have our ACR created, and I can actually see it here. This is the one that we just created, a.frank learn live. I happen to have another one here. So this is just the connected registries that I have based on my authentication to Azure. And right now it's blank. There's nothing in it. So we'll go back to this when we start pushing content to it. But this is just an easy way to view, like, what did I do and where did things show up? And that's literally it. It's that easy.
So, and by the way, on those registries, on Azure Container Registry, since you can put multiple types of artifacts in there, people could actually use that same container registry to put both container images in it, put Helm charts in it, and put Bicep modules in it. So they could do that. Would it be a good idea to do that? Do you
Yeah, that's actually a great
doing like that, or?
Yeah, that's a great point. So there's no real negative other than making sure you have access control kind of sorted out. That would probably be the biggest thing. But if you're willing to have kind of what happens in a lot of organizations is they'll have like a epic kind of central registry where they dump a lot of content in that they give out access to. You can break things down further from there, but that's kind of the easy, naive approach to start out with. And there's no problem with having container images and Helm charts and Bicep modules all in the same registry. In fact, and we'll talk about this a little bit towards the end, we push content from Microsoft to what we call the Bicep public registry that everyone has access to. And what we're doing for that literally is pushing content to the Microsoft container registry, which is where all the container images that Microsoft publishes lives, and Helm charts and whatever. So we're doing that today. We just kind of put everything in one big container registry.
Okay. Yeah, I did see a hiccup in your stream. I don't know whether
Oh,
it's it was my connection or yours, but I did see a hiccup. But let's hope we don't see further
the
hiccups.
short
You,
answer is yes. You can
yeah,
do that
okay.
with the stream. That is no problem.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. So I think that brings us back to the slides. Now that we've seen how you can create a container registry, I think so next step will be then, yeah, you now have the registry. Now, how do you actually publish modules to that registry, right? Now, the thing is, since this is using Azure Container Registry, what you'll see here is that it's well, very similar to how, yeah, you use Azure Container Registry for, let's say, container images. And the thing you need to know here is that every module that you push to the container registry it will have what we call a module path. And the biggest difference here, what you'll see is that uh, for Bicep modules, you'll have a specific scheme in place. The scheme will be BR. That's the first part of the path. Now, Alex, I've been wondering, what does the BR actually stand for? Is it like Bicep registry or yeah,
Yeah,
I guess
BR
that's right.
stands for Bicep registry, and the reason we need it is because you can also reference template specs with a similar path. So if we see BR, we know it's a Bicep module and a registry. If we see TS for template specs, we know you're referencing a template spec somewhere in Azure.
Okay, so this is actually then an ARM, an Azure Resource Manager thing, and not necessarily an container registry thingy.
Yeah,
That's
it's actually that's a
prefix.
great yeah, it's a great point. That is unique to Bicep and ARM. It is not something you will see in general container day to day.
Exactly. Okay. Okay. Cool. So BR, that's the first part. Then you put in the name of your registry. So Alex just created the registry. I don't remember the name that you took, but it's gonna be the name of your registry .azurecr.io. That's like the regular extension for all container registries you create on Azure. And then next you have your module identifier, meaning that you actually can use a kind of like a path-based approach to put your actual modules in the container registry, right? And I think you can put as many slashes in there as you want. You can actually use some kind of a naming scheme, let's say, for your modules. So potentially, if people are using that registry both for container images and Helm charts and Bicep modules, they can actually put, let's say, as part of that module identifier, maybe image slash something or module slash something or Helm charts slash something. It's just to keep track of things, right?
Yeah, and I think there are, I'm not as familiar with this part of it, admittedly, but I think there are some like access control type things that you can do with that module or with that, they call it a repository. I think there was a note about that in the slides, but the path or the hierarchy of the path, you can say that this group of users only has permissions to push to this repository or this part of the registry hierarchy. I know for MCR, that's how they kind of separate out access. We, as the Bicep team, are only able to push to the Bicep repository within MCR.
Okay, and that makes sense indeed that you actually access control based on the path then.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then the last version is actually your tag or module version. Now on tagging so the tag is actually, well, the version of the module that you're pushing, right? And you can actually reuse a tag, like you can name everything V1, let's say, but that's not actually a good practice. If you see, yeah, and there's also different like versioning schemes, like naming conventions or naming ways that you can use for those tags. This is definitely something that we want to talk about, as in, because there's different schemes that people may use. Yeah? And it's, as Alex mentioned at the beginning of the module, where whatever you already know about versioning and versioning schemes, exactly the same like rules apply here as well. Yeah? And you can go for simple schemes like just using an integer that increments. Yeah? Or you can go for a scheme where maybe you use dates, like the date on which you publish the module, which will eventually also be incremental, because dates are always progressing. You won't see the same day pass by again, otherwise you're Doctor Who. And then you also have the semantic versioning, right? And semantic versioning is basically like you have your major version, you have your minor version, you have your hotfix version. And with semantic versioning, the rule goes that once you have a breaking change somewhere, you update the major version, so people know this is a breaking change. And otherwise, you either update the minor version for small changes, and then the hotfix version for just a hotfix. Now, the thing is, I do think that both of us have a preference when it comes to a versioning scheme, right? And I see you nodding again, so.
Yeah, I mean, semver, semantic versioning, you can Google semver, and there's a lot of guidance on it, is kind of the industry standard at this point, because semantic, meaning it has meaning to the versioning. In other words, if you're just incrementing by date, you know that there's a new version and you know nothing else. It could be a breaking change, it could be a patch, it could be God knows what. So you can't with confidence know that I can upgrade to this new version unless you inspect all the code, which is obviously more work. The nice thing about semantic versioning, even though there's more work up front because you have to know, am I going to do a major or a minor or a patch version? It helps everybody else in the ecosystem, because if there's just an increment to the patch version, usually you can kind of accept that safely. You should always test any upgrades of any kind. But you can usually safely take on a change like that, versus if you see that it's a major version, you know that there's some breaking change that may affect you and you need to be much more careful about it. So we love semantic versioning. You'll see that in all the packages that Microsoft is producing, not just with Bicep modules, but NuGet packages and NPM modules and you name it.
Yeah, and basically our what we're also advising people, and I know that the guidance in the module on the learn side is actually a bit off on what we are advising here today, and I'm actually going to talk to people publishing the learn module itself on the learn side after this session to actually get some updates in the guidance that we have there. But one of the things that we actually want to stress upon is that whenever you make a change to a Bicep module and you push that change to a private registry, update the version, like update the minor or the patch version based on what kind of change it is, but don't do a push with a change to the same version number. Even if you're using semantic versioning, it's just a small effort to increment that number. The reason is that you don't want people to redeploy the same template or the same module and get a different result. And that's basically because then you're getting unexpected results for users of that module, and that's not what you want, right?
Yeah, think of your modules, and this goes for any versioning of anything, as immutable entities once they've been published. The second that you've published it, make an assumption that your whole organization depends on it, and if you were to remove it or change it, you would cause some pain somewhere. So think of them as immutable. There's no there's a negative in the sense that version is still out there, I suppose, but that's a better negative than someone getting upgraded in a way that they weren't expecting to, kind of behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly. Also, by the way, on the date format as a versioning scheme, just do know that every time that you publish something to Azure Container Registry, there is actually an extra tag in there that is based on the date that you're publishing it. So that is actually, if you're versioning based on dates, then that's actually obsolete information. That info is already in there. So hence, again, pushing on the semantic versioning here and telling you, well, go for that one. We are a bit opinionated here, but yeah, in this case, I don't think it's wrong to have an opinion on this one. And Also, one of the things on the versioning policies, and this is also somewhere where we divert a bit on what's on the learn side in this module, is that we do like anytime you do a change, and we touched upon this, anytime you do a change, either significant or even small or a hotfix, update the version. On the hotfix or on a small change, you might say, well, in this case, it's the minor or the patch version that we update. And again, what you'll see on the learn side on this one is that it says, I think it says not necessarily to update, but we would say, nah, just don't bother and update that thing. Again, it's a small effort. On deleting old versions, that as well, we're a bit opinionated, right, Alex? I didn't update the slide on this one, but we are opinionated on this one.
Yeah. I think the overarching guidance is to be really careful, right? So if you're going to take an action like delete a version, you better be really confident that nobody's using it. And there's not always necessarily an easy way to tell if somebody's using it. So it's something that you want to really tread lightly on, because you've introduced something out into the world, and now you're going to take it away, and you don't know who has a dependency on you.
Yeah, and that's basically like the deleting is like the problem where people like I'm thinking Nugget here, yeah? Nugget, which is the versioning tool that a lot of people use for like .NET packages. That as well, that like the deletion of old versions or of old packages is actually the reason why people use like a local cache of Nugget packages.
Yeah.
But you don't want to, you actually don't want to be doing that. So that's the thing. Just keep it right. It's not like it's costing you tons of money to keep that version around. It's the Bicep modules. They are small things. They will not, like, you won't end up with gigabytes and gigabytes of Azure Container Registry. It will rather be your container images in there that will make the container registry big, not necessarily the Bicep modules.
Yes, and the money you will save by deleting old modules is paltry compared to the money you will cost your company with some unexpected outage, or missing some kid's birthday party on the weekend, or whatever it is.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't want to do that. So and that's the note that you see here, or the tip that you see here. So when you're using the modules and when you're doing private registries, consider the users of your modules, and be sure that you know what will happen when you update something or when you delete something. Update those versions. Just do it, and try to avoid surprising your users. That's I think the best tip we can give on that one. So then, how do you actually publish a module? There's a statement for that. It's AZ Bicep publish if you're using AZ CLI. If you're using Azure PowerShell, and here as well we updated the slide as opposed to what's in the Learn module. Because there's actually a new PowerShell statement for publishing a Bicep module. We just now publish AZ Bicep module. And thanks, Alex, for pointing that out, because I didn't know that one either. So I learned something today as well. Cool. But let's just show that to people how they can actually publish a module.
Cool.
So let's switch again, to the VS Code. Cool.
We can switch back to VS Code. Okay, so we are done with this ACR file because we already created our container registry. So I have this isn't exactly what's in the Learn module, but I wanted to keep it really basic so we can look at and focus on what's happening that's relevant to this demo. So I have a cookie cutter storage account. I actually used the snippet. So I just did res storage and just inserted that as a way to get this code. And then I just tweaked the name of it so that I get a unique storage account name. Kind and SKU of the storage account don't really matter. And then I have a couple of parameters here, which we'll talk through this in the context of like IntelliSense and validation of these external modules and kind of how that works when we consume it. But for right now, it's not super critical because we're just going to publish this content to the registry. Okay, so I have in CLI, I'm going to use AZ Bicep publish, just like Gitte was presenting on the slides. And I need 2 arguments here. One is the file. So I can do -f or a -- file. And I'm going to point it to storage.bicep. And then I need to give it what's called a target. And this is where you want this module to live in that hierarchy that we were talking about. So this is where those segments, those components of the URL become important. So the first thing that we need is the scheme. So we're going to do br:. Then we're going to do the URL of the registry. So it's a.franklearnlive.azure-cr.io. And then we're going to add the module identifier now. So we'll do /, and then we'll decide where we want this to live. So I'm going to make a repository called my modules so that I can have all the modules living in one place. And then I'll just call this storage. I could call it my storage. I could call it my special storage, whatever I wanted. And then I do : and that's the separator where then I can add the tag or the version.
And you can then actually like choose that path. You can choose that name, right? That's free text.
Yeah, this is totally up to you. There are some character restrictions here as well. But yeah, you can nest this 5 levels deep. I could not have a repository if I wanted. So if I wanted everything in the container registry to be on the top level, I could just do it like that. But I like to have it organized in a folder. So I'm going to do my modules. And then I'll give it a version. So we are going to be good citizens, and we're going to use semantic versioning because it's a pre-release, because I'm not ready for anyone to use it. I'm going to do 0 as my major version, and then I'll do .1.1 because it's the first version. And that's it. Did you have something?
Yeah, no, I was wondering, suppose that I forget that BR column. I would still be able to push that, right? Or would the AZ Bicep publish like flag me on that if I don't do BR column?
Let's see what happens. Let's test how our error handling works, if at all.
And the thing is, I would expect, cool, that's nice.
Yeah, so at least we give you a friendly error. So we do require that you provide that scheme because we do need to know if it's going to be a registry reference or a template spec reference. I guess we could probably intuit that it should be BR, but I think just for consistency's sake, we ask you to put it in both cases.
Yeah, but that's nice that the errors check is there. That's because I would expect that maybe people might forget about the BR column. Right?
Totally. Yeah, this URL is not as user-friendly as probably we would like it to be. We'll talk about aliases in a second, and that can make this a little bit easier to work with. But let's go ahead and publish this. Hopefully it works. And it should just take a second because it's just pushing that file to the registry. And we'll be able to verify that it's there. So this came back with no response, so I can assume that it worked successfully. I can do a couple things now to verify that it's actually there. So I can use the azcli command. So I can do az-acr repository show, repository list. We're free-forming it right now. The name is a.frank.
I think it's going to be show. List will give you a list of all the container registries in your accounts. Right?
Okay, let's see what happens.
I think it's show that you need.
Oh.
Or is it list? Sorry.
This one is going to be a list. I think in the Wern module, it's az-acr show to show what's in that.
Yeah, it's repository. Yeah. Sorry.
No problem.
You're totally right.
So we can see that my module is represented there in some capacity, so that's good. And then just like before, I can use the Docker extension. And keep in mind, like we didn't have to go to the AZ-ACR team and beg on our hands and knees, can you please update this with Bicep support? We really would like it. It would make our customers happy. We get this stuff for free, right? Because we're just taking advantage of the container registry ecosystem. And so there's a way to list all your images, and we benefit from that. And the same thing with the Docker extension, right? So we didn't have to make any changes to this extension to get it to show Bicep modules. And here we can see that as well. And it'll even, I believe, show us the version. Now, one thing that doesn't work is to actually see the module. That we would have to beg on our hands and knees to get them to support something like this. But at least you can see, okay, it's there. I know what version it is. I can kind of work with that a little bit.
And if you would open that same ACR repository and module in the Azure portal, would it show the contents?
It won't show
just
the contents. Yeah, it won't show the contents there either.
Okay.
It'll know about it, and it'll give you some, like, I think it's called the digest or a manifest of like some metadata about the artifact that you just pushed, but it won't understand that it's a Bicep.
But not the content. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And I'm guessing that for, let's say, if I would push a Helm chart, I would also not see the contents of my Helm chart if I would.
That's a good question. If it worked, it would have to be something they had implemented special. I wouldn't be surprised if that worked, but it's not something you would get for free.
Yeah. If it's there, you would still need to then go talk to the ACR team.
Yes, yeah.
To get it in there for Bicep as well.
Yeah, like, we would say, like, what the heck? Why'd you do this for Helm? Why didn't you do this for us?
Exactly. No, cool. And I think that's the last bit of the demo, right?
Yes, I think that.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Cool. Then we can go back to slides. So the module is now there. It's in the private registry. Now, next step will be using that module somewhere in another Bicep template. So how can you do that? The thing is, it's super easy. At least if you know how to use a Bicep module, it's super easy. And there's not such a big difference, or not a real difference at all. The biggest difference is that instead of using like the local path to the module, to the Bicep module, now you're using the registry path. And that's exactly the same thing that we've already shown you, which is that br : link that you also use to create the module in the registry. You're now using that same link to now use that module within your own Bicep template. So nothing new there. Using it as well, like what you know of using a regular module, you give the module a name and you pass the parameters to the module. And you already had also parameters in that storage module that you've shown in the demo. So probably when we, as a next step, start using it, we'll also start setting parameters to that one, right?
Yep.
Now, one thing is that indeed that path, it's a long thing, right? It's like a whole bunch of information you need to put, but you can actually shorten that. And that's indeed where aliases come in. And an alias is actually a way to simplify those module definitions, to actually shorten that long path that you have. So it's a means of keeping your Bicep file tidier and of having to type that name repeatedly. Because suppose you have a private registry and, well, now currently Alex has just one module in there, but suppose we're really using that across the organization. A lot of people are publishing modules to that. And in the end, we have like 10 or maybe 100 modules in there, and you want to use them in another Bicep template. If you need to retype that full registry link time and time again, that just becomes very, very cumbersome. Yeah? In case you change registry, for instance, and that might be the case, like you might say, hey, but why would I want to change my registry suddenly? Well, I'm just thinking maybe potentially, well, I see this done at least for container image registries, where people use a different registry for their dev and test environments than what they do for their production environments. Yeah, and in that case, you do need to change registries because it's a different one. And it might also be that you have different registries for different situations. In all those cases, you want to be able to vary on the registry. Yeah. I don't know, Alex, if you wanted to chip in there.
Yeah, no, I think especially those last two bullets are like, I think selfishly, the first two bullets are the reasons why I wanted the feature. I really did not like writing that whole URL out. But the second two bullets are actually the most important reasons for an alias, is because if you do need to change it, you don't only have to change it in one spot for your project, and it's decoupled from your actual Bicep code, which is a really important principle in software engineering for increasing maintainability. we're drifting off topic, but we've talked about Helm charts and Kubernetes manifests a little bit just because we're talking about containers. But in a lot of Kubernetes manifests, you have these full registry URLs. I'm sure you've seen this with your customers. And if that registry were to get deleted or whatever, or the image were to move to a different registry, you're in a tough spot because you then have to make sure you're updating everything correctly. So this provides a little bit of decoupling and indirection. You mentioned the like NuGet mirroring, where people will get like a private instance of what's available publicly. That's a really common scenario because they don't want to kind of naively take changes out of band and submit themselves potentially to supply chain attacks or something like that. This makes it really easy to like set up a mirror. You don't have to change your code. You just have to change the registry reference, which we'll demo as well.
Yeah, exactly. And like the way you do that, like the way you create an alias is you actually need to create a what we call a bicep config.json file in the same folder as where you have your bicep files, or maybe in like a top folder, I guess that would also work, right?
Yeah, we'll work our way up the hierarchy until we...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So a bicep config.json file, it does need to be called bicep config. And in that, you actually define then your module aliases. So in this case, the bicep config.json file contains a module aliases section, one for BR bicep registry. The registry itself is called my registry. And you actually, the my registry is actually a what's that called, like a semantic name. That's how you will reference that registry then in your bicep template, and you're making that an alias then for the longer name, which is myregistry.azure-cr.io. Yeah. So if you then start using it, then instead of putting the full name there, you're actually saying, hey, this is now my registry, and you don't put myregistry.azure-cr.io as you see in the bottom part. Now, what is a big difference here, well, it looks a bit funny, but up till now we've always done BR colon, but now it's BR slash. Yeah? So that's the biggest difference from using an alias as opposed to not using an alias. If you're not using an alias, it's BR colon. If you are using an alias, it's BR slash that you use. And I guess that's like the switch for Bicep then to know, oh, this is an alias, so I need to go look at the Bicep config file, right?
Yeah, you nailed it right on the head. Like we had to have a lot of conversations of like, what's the like least disruptive changes we can make to the URL so that like Bicep can understand the difference and that like we don't violate any like HTTP like URL like requirements. And so you're kind of threading the needle to find something that's like decent. So we're pretty happy with how this one turned out, but it was a little tricky.
Yeah. Now, the thing is, you can take this a step further because like currently you're only like aliasing the myregistry.azure-cr.io, but you also have that colon bicep there. And that's the thing, you can actually take that a step further, where you can also alias out the path itself. Yeah? So, and in that case, in this case, the module alias, we call it my registry with path, as you see in the top section. And we have like an alias both for the registry and for the module path then. So hence, then you can replace that full string, let's say, by my registry with path, and then name of the module. That's the second part of the path. Like I'll just switch back one slide so you see the clear difference there. But previously it said bicep slash my module, which was the path, the full path. And we actually replaced part of the path, which was just the first part, which is bicep, right? And so my module is still there. But I guess people could actually add in the bicep config.json file in the top section, instead of just saying, hey, the module path is bicep, they could say bicep slash my module, right? So they can take this as far as they want to go with that.
Yeah, and you can do several levels of the hierarchy if you want to. This is my preferred way of setting things up because I have kind of a shared registry for the Alex Frankel organization. I have container images and whatever else. So I have my Bicep modules folder, and I'll have an alias that goes right to that. And that makes it pretty easy for me to consume everything.
To reference things. Yeah, exactly. So the thing is, whether you're using aliases or not, and whether you're using modules from, well, actually, whether you're using modules in a private registry or not, deploying those Bicep templates to your Azure environment, nothing changes there, right? You still just do a Bicep build, and you can just do an AZ deployment group create, like you've shown previously, with just, well, that was with a Bicep template without a module. And without using a private registry, but suppose there was a module or a private registry in that, it's still the same AZ statements, right? But, and that's the thing, it might be that you do want to, let's say, fetch those modules in the private registry beforehand. And then there's like actually a Bicep restore command available for you, and that will then actually fetch those private modules. So, and what would be the use case, Alex, of actually running a Bicep restore?
If you want to be like really particular about your like network requests and when you're doing them, you might want to use restore. So if you have kind of a restricted pipeline type of scenario where, I don't know, maybe you don't have as much internet access on a build or on your deployment in particular, and you want to do the restores in advance of that, we give you that option. So like, sometimes you have like compile time references versus deploy time references. In general with Bicep, if you kind of don't think about it, you're doing deploy time references because you're going to say, okay, deploy this file. And when you do that is when we'll run the build for you in the background, pull the module references, validate everything, and do the deployment. If you want to turn it into kind of compile time references or dependencies, you can do the restore in advance. We'll get all the files in the right spot so that when you build, you're going to be using a local cached version of the files. You won't actually be going and getting the reference again.
And if someone runs a Bicep restore, where would those downloaded module files, where would they be stored? Would they be in your user directory, or would they be in the local file directory? Where would you keep them?
They'll be in your user profile directory, depending on what operating system you're on. It's all documented. That's a great question.
Yeah.
It is somewhere. It won't pollute your Bicep project.
Okay, and that's actually then very similar. Well, I guessed user directly. This is a question I didn't ask you beforehand before the session, and I guessed based on how I know how NuGet works, because they do something very similar, and
right.
That's also how I know sometimes people to recover from suddenly a NuGet version not being there anymore, and then
right.
they're like, oh, but maybe the build server still has it in the cache,
right.
And then they recover it from
Someone
there.
go quickly, get it before it disappears forever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I've been in that situation before.
Yeah, and there's pros and cons. Like if you're using Node, JavaScript, or TypeScript, the Node modules, which are your dependency, are famously in your project directory. And so you'll inevitably see GitHub projects where Node modules were accidentally checked in. So you have like hundreds of megs or gigabytes of dependencies in your project accidentally. So this prevents that kind of thing from happening. But I won't start like a turf war about what's the right thing.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to both.
Yeah.
To both actually. Yeah, cool. But let's have a look on how you then use modules from your registry. So let's go back to your Visual Studio Code and let's show that one.
Cool. So let's go back to VS Code, like you were saying. Okay, I don't know. What did I change in this file? Nothing. Okay, so I have a main.bicep file here. And well, let's do it in this order. So we're going to reference the module in kind of like the naive way, and then we'll layer on aliases on top of that. So I want to deploy this storage account. So I'm going to do module, just like I always do. Storage deploy. And then here's where you need to, instead of doing a local reference, and it's asking me if I want to use storage.bicep, but I want to use the remote reference. So same URL as before, br colon a.frank learnlive.azure-cr.io /my modules /storage :o.1.1. And right now it's going to say this module has not been restored. So you can kind of see that in the error message right now. What's happening?
So it actually knows then if it's been restored, like if it's in your cache or not. It actually knows that.
Exactly.
That's cool. That's cool. And
Yeah.
is this actually like case sensitive? Because I don't remember if you did my modules with uppercase on the M or not. But
let's find out. I think it is. Oh yeah. So actually, in ACR, your module references have to be all lowercase.
Okay.
So we'll switch that to lowercase.
So that's good to know then as well.
Yeah, I think the URL though, yeah, the domain of the registry does not have to be case sensitive, which is of course as confusing as it can be. But that works. So what happened in the background, so we had that red squiggly under the whole module reference and it said it has not been restored. If it had failed to restore, so we can show that too, we can use a version that doesn't exist. And it's going to say, in this case, we were unable to restore because this module doesn't exist in the registry. So you get some feedback there. And then, so when we go to O.1.1, which is a real reference, the red squiggly disappears because one, it found it in the registry. And then two, we were able to restore it into that local cache for you in the background. So there's nothing you really needed to do other than to get the reference correct.
And this is actually like the VS Code Bicep extension kicking in, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Exactly.
Cool.
Now I still get errors because obviously this is not a complete module reference. So we'll do equals, we'll do required properties, which is a convenient way of kind of slotting all these properties in. We'll call this storage deploy. And then name prefix is a required parameter. And it's a required parameter because there was no default provided. So we can see that IntelliSense is working. Even though this is a remote reference, we're able to work with it as if it was a local module because, like we were saying, it is literally a local module that we've cached on your behalf. And so we're able to kind of handle that, all those references. And so we know, go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that's actually nice that even though it's a remote thing, this like the plugin is actually helping you out, caching it, and you get all those goodies that you have exactly the same with local modules. You get that here as well with the modules in the private registry. So that's actually very, very nice.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll have a name prefix. So we'll do a.frank learn. And that's all that I need. But if I wanted to look at what other parameters I had available, there's my optional parameter of location. If I wanted to override that, I could do that here, but I'll just leave that alone. And that's how easy it is to reference the module. Like you said, there's no real change other than to get the reference correct. Outside of that, it all just works the same way. We can do a couple of things to kind of talk through what the end-to-end flow is of deploying it. So normally in day-to-day usage, you don't need to build your own Bicep files, but we can look at it because it's kind of instructive to understand what happened. So let's actually build this. We'll do az bicep build, and then we'll do main.bicep. And this is going to generate the JSON equivalent. So now we have a main.json file, and we can actually look at what happened. So we have some metadata that we don't need to focus on. So in the resources section, we have a nested deployment is what this is called. So when we compile your Bicep files with modules, each module turns into a nested deployment. It's just basically our way of packaging it all into a single file while preserving kind of like the semantic integrity of what you expressed in Bicep. So we turn this into a deployment. There's a bunch of properties here that aren't super critical. Here's our parameters where we provided this parameter value. And then in the template, this is actually the built version of the module reference. So we had our storage.bicep module. This is what it looks like translated to ARM template. And the key thing to take away here is that in the ARM template that we generate, there's not still some reference to the module URL. We actually grab the bicep file, turn it into JSON, pack it in with your main file as part of the build process. Because we do it because it's the easiest thing for us to do and the simplest thing to kind of manage from a maintenance perspective. So it's just important to understand that, you know, you're not perpetually having some external reference. If you were to build the file in advance, change your module reference, and then deploy the JSON, you would be using effectively the previous version of the module. But in reality, as long as you're kind of using the normal workflows and not building yourself, this is kind of like a thing that happens in the background that you don't need to pay too much attention to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's nice to know that you can actually like spit out that JSON file as well. Like I'm just thinking of use cases where you might have like a build server, or you automate this and you want to have exactly the same version when you go from your dev environment to your test to your production environment, and you want to make absolutely sure. Like if you do this, if you build it beforehand and then you go off of the main.json file instead of the bicep file, you just know that the module won't be changed behind your back between the environments. So then you have an exact copy actually. So then you, even in case people would be overriding versions and not properly using the semantic versioning, you're actually protecting yourself against that, more or less.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point.
Cool.
Cool. So we showed what this built as. We can start deploying it, but frankly, it's not a very exciting deployment, right? So just the exact same command we did at the beginning to deploy the ACR file, we'll do the same thing with our main.bicep file. So we'll do az deployment group create -g learn live registries, which is our resource group. And then we'll just point to main.bicep. And that same build step that we just showed in great detail, that's happening now under the covers. And not a valid source name. Oh, my name is too long. So we'll do just ADF learn.
Yeah, because you had you're putting like an extension to the the storage account name, right? So it's actually longer than what you put here as parameter value.
Exactly. And there's probably opportunities to be able to better validate things, but that was pretty good because that was caught before the deployment started. That was in a phase of the deployment called pre-flight. So nothing had to get created in order to tell me that, hey, this is going to fail. So that was a nice one. So thank you to Azure.
And the thing is actually also on the pre-flight validation, once we go into the next round of these learn modules and the live sessions that we do on those, we'll actually, on the automation bits, we'll actually also talk about the pre-flight validation and why it's important and why it's also a nice thing to actually have within your automation cycle. But I'm just putting out a teaser for what's to come next.
That was a good accidental teaser that I
exactly.
So that's going to deploy hopefully successfully, but like I said, not terribly exciting. So let's create an alias because this string is very long and ugly and we don't want to look at it and we want to decouple for all the reasons that we talked about. So I'm going to use a command in Bicep that actually got recently added. So this is nice. Within Bicep, there is a create Bicep configuration file command. So this will just ask me where I want to save it. I want to save it in the same directory. So this creates Bicep config with kind of like a minimum. It's actually a little bit more than the minimum. This could be blank because you don't need Bicep config. But this kind of teaches you that, hey, these analyzers, the linter rules exist if you wanted to change them. But we're going to delete this for now. You get IntelliSense with Bicep config, so we try to make it as easy as possible. So the relevant property that we care about is module aliases. And you'll see it slots in one for, excuse me, one for TS, for template specs, and one for BR. We don't need the template spec one, so we'll delete that. And then now you don't get IntelliSense because you need to provide the name of the alias that you want. So we'll just call this we'll just call this learn live, make this easy. And now I get IntelliSense. And then here are those two properties that we were looking at. One is the registry, which is the important one. And this is where we'll do a.frank learn live.azure-cr.io. And then I want to include that module path so that I can do my underscore modules. And then I can have an easier reference in my Bicep file. So now we'll just copy and paste this and comment it out so we can see the comparison. Instead of all this garbage, I can just do br/learn live :storage. And the fact that it did validate does mean that I got this right. So if I fat fingered it, I would get an error, and it's going to go and look at bicep config and make sure this alias actually exists and that it can actually restore the file when it resolves all the references, which it can in this case. So that's good.
Oh, that's really cool. Like I do like the shorter names. It's like, but like in my head, you do need to like replace the columns by slashes and the slashes by columns. That's like the replacement you need to do, right?
Yeah. I think one issue that we have outstanding where we're not helping as much as we should is actually doing completions for these registry references. Mm-hmm. So ideally, you should be able to just do, actually when you're here,
you should be able to just tap your way to it.
In addition to the local references, there should be a BR and a TS. And when you do BR, it should list the aliases. If you want any aliases, you hit enter on the alias. Like it should just do everything.
Yeah, but that's something you're working on then. Like it's something coming up.
Yeah. Including all the the version, we can list the versions, all the tags. So we should be able to make it really easy.
The dog chipping in as well. Cool.
Yes, the dog loves Bicep modules. We have a 5-month-old puppy, so apologies hearing it in the background.
Yeah, no worries. So just one more pointer is that because now we're using private registries, and you mentioned it before that there's actually also a public registry that people can use that actually has, like, let's say, official Bicep modules that people can reuse in their own deployments. That's correct. And I think we'll also put the link up in the, like, as a banner as well for people to see where it's at, but they can find that on GitHub, right?
Yes, so I will show it. There's a repository called Bicep Registry Modules, and there's a link now at the bottom. Which is modules that we as Microsoft are going to publish. We're in the very early stages of kind of figuring out what type of content should be in the public registry, what is useful on a broad scale. So there's not a ton in here right now, but we are kind of working through some of those decisions of what makes sense here. So we can see we have a bunch of modules here already. We have some that are useful. These were actually contributed by the AKS Accelerator team. So we have a couple of deployment scripts that are there to set up AKS, some of those things that you can't do with Bicep or ARM templates today. And I can go and look at the code. I can look at a README for those things. And what's nice is, excuse me, what's nice is that we actually default the public registry as an alias in your Bicep config. So even if you don't set it up, you kind of have access to it. So I can do another module reference. We'll do certs, because I think that was one of them, right? Yeah, Great Vault certificate. So in here, we'll do br/public is the alias name. And then in this case, we can just copy and paste this. And then the version is 1.1.1 is the latest. So I'll just use that. And then that's going to restore. So in that way, just like with NuGet.org or NPM, we're trying to build up a library of publicly accessible content that's kind of broadly useful. So you'll continue to see that kind of develop over time.
Yeah, and I've looked at the AKS one for this, and I actually quite liked it. It's like a way of like running kubectl statements. So kubectl, if you want to like run statements against your AKS cluster, like maybe just do a check like kubectl get pods to see, or get nodes to see if all your nodes are there. Yep. After your deployment, maybe that's potentially something useful that you can use. And like you mentioned, the AKS accelerator, which is one of the things teams at Microsoft are working on as well, to actually help people easily and quickly deploy an AKS cluster in an enterprise-ready way. So I would say just Google that one, AKS accelerator. You'll bump into a lot of templates for that one. The templates, if I remember correctly, they are available in JSON ARM templates, so JSON azure-resource-manager templates. They are available as Bicep templates, and Terraform should be there as well. So, which is actually a great way of getting started on AKS. I'm just wondering for the like the one that you're using now, and because I looked at that one again as well. I was just wondering, because this one is creating a self-signed certificate in Key Vault. If I read that one correctly.
Yep.
So this one will be repeatable time and time again and give exactly the same results, or will it override what is there?
It should be idempotent. So we ask, especially for if you're going to contribute one that is a deployment script, we do want to make sure that those scripts are idempotent so that you can deploy it a second time and it won't wipe out what you've done or get a new cert or anything like that. There should be some logic to check that. And if there isn't, you can report an issue to that repo, and we have a way of routing it to the person. Right now, we only take contributions from Microsoft full-time employees. We hope to expand that out down the road, but for now, we have a good way of saying, okay, you need to go and fix this. Okay. That will start a process. If they submit a PR and fix it, you'll get a brand new version. So the flawed 1.1.1 will continue to exist, but then there will be 1.1.2, and that will fix the issue. And that's us following our own good principles of semantic versioning, leaving a version out there that is not good for whatever reason so that we don't break anybody.
Yeah, but and that's the thing with these modules as well. We're aiming for the idempotency, right? That's what the goal should be. Yeah. I also see we only have a couple minutes left, by the way, in this session. So one of the things I'll do is we'll skip the knowledge check for this module. So I'd say for people wanting to go through the knowledge check, feel free to do that in the live in the learn session itself. But we also have a question from the audience as well, and I think it's actually a very interesting question. And I would like to handle that one for the last minutes that we have, which is they have published modules to the registry, but someone wants to see the original code that makes up the module. So the original code of that module in the registry. So what options would people have to actually view that original code of the module? Because we kind of saw that like the Docker extension is not showing it. The portal will also not show it. So are there other options that people can use on that one?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it gives us an opportunity to talk a little bit more about what's happening behind the scenes. Because when we were designing this, some of these things that I'm about to show were not obvious to me. So let's actually talk about them. If I do right click and go to definition on the module, that's going to work. I can hold control click. That means the same thing. Go to definition. So we'll click that. And we'll see, we actually get to this read-only view of the module itself that we have restored. And obviously, this is not Bicep code. This is JSON code. So let me share a little bit about why that is. Basically, we store a transpiled or compiled version to the ARM template to decouple it from the version of Bicep that generated this code. And the reason that we do that is because it's possible to get yourself in a situation where module publisher used Bicep version A, and then module consumer has Bicep version B, or your pipeline agent has Bicep version B. And what did compile for the module author may not necessarily compile for the consumer. And the way that we kind of avoid that problem from happening is we only work with the compiled JSON. And there's no loss in fidelity or functionality when it comes to IntelliSense or anything like that. We're still able to do all those things. But this is a way of basically avoiding a whole set of problems that you could otherwise be exposed to, that it makes this version independent. So if go ahead.
Yeah, so like from the moment you push it to the registry, you're working with the transpiled version. That's basically what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah,
okay, cool.
Exactly. And there's precedence for this in other languages. So in NuGet, my understanding is you're not working with C# code. You're working with DLLs or something that's compiled to CIL, which I forget. I know I'm supposed to define acronyms. Common something.
Intermediate language.
Something like that. Or CLR, Common Language Runtime. I don't know, but there's something in NuGet land.
Or Common Language Specification, CLS, something like that. Yeah. Exactly. Something compiled, but then for C#, right?
Exactly. Not the code that you wrote is the main point. And in TypeScript land, you're not transacting TypeScript code. You're exchanging JavaScript code, the transpiled TypeScript. So this follows those kinds of principles.
Okay, makes sense. Excellent question and excellent answer. So I do think we need to wrap up the module session or the learn session for now. So excellent demos. Well, great explanation. It was nice to see this all in practice and to see the VS Code helping out with a lot of stuff here. So that's excellent stuff there. We'll switch back to slides. And so I hope for everybody listening that you'll learn a ton of new stuff, that you'll be able to use private registries, that you'll be able to create them as well, and that you'll be able to actually start using them to publish your modules to them and to start consuming those modules from that private registry. On the public registry, by the way, Alex, any like you said, we're only just starting out with this one, but I guess people can expect more and more modules, official modules from Microsoft to pop up there in the next coming weeks or months, right? That's like the plan.
Yep. Yeah, we do want to build up that ecosystem and that library.
Okay, cool. That's awesome to know. So the thing is, so in case you want to learn more and so you've seen Alex do the demos and show that stuff to you, but it's a great thing to just get that hands-on learning yourself as well. So I would say go through the module as well on Microsoft Learn, do the exercises, play with this, try it out, see how things are behaving. And we also hope that you'll tune in for next week's session. So next week, we already mentioned it, but next week it's going to be template specs. Oh no, this is still the current one, which is a Learn Live one. But next week, that's this slide. Next week, it's going to be the template specs. So tune in for that one as well. It's going to be content that's very, very related to these private registries for the Bicep modules. Very interesting session as well, that one. I have no idea who's going to present it, but it's going to be awesome people anyways. So, and yeah, I hope you had a great time. I did, and I hope you learned tons. And let's see you next time on Learn Live. Bye everyone.
Thanks, Gitte.
Yeah, thanks, Alex.